What's up, everyone? Welcome back to another episode of the Agents to Owners podcast. I am very excited to welcome Dawn Janes-Bartley with us here today. Dawn is the president of Minnesota Insurance Group, which has been in business since 1997. Dawn, I know you keep a very busy personal and professional schedule, so thank you very much for being here today and welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me, Brad.
Yeah, thank you for being here. I'm excited to go over a lot of different areas of business, being that we're both from Minnesota and there is now about 2 feet of snow on the ground. Inside is a good place to be. So, like we always do, why don't you give us a little background on Dawn and how you got into the insurance?
Yeah. So I've been in it about 25 years. My background's child psych and chem dev counseling. So I don't have a family member in insurance. I don't consider myself a salesperson. I am an entrepreneur at heart. It's not my first business. It isn't my only business. It probably won't be my last business. But it definitely feeds my soul. I really enjoy what I do, and I fell into it from a customer service standpoint. And I've really gravitated towards commercial and risk management and consultative work. Twice I've had the opportunity to be a paid expert witness for agent E&O claims. So, best practices and things like that. There's just so much area in this, and I definitely love the risk management and consultation part of what I do.
So how did you start Minnesota Insurance?
Yes. For the most part, I actually was looking for a job that was like 9 to 4 with benefits and time off and holidays. And I interviewed around and I got hired at an agency, and they were like, look, instead of having you be a W-2 with all those benefits you're looking for, why don't you be an agent and commission only, and we'll pay you what you sell. And so, I basically came home with a sales job. I went looking for a cushy office job. And so I started at an agency as a 1099 commission only person. And I laugh to this day that I remember my first check was like $89. And like my next check, I owed them money, and I still couldn't figure out how I could owe more. I mean, something canceled, but it's like, how do I owe more than I ever made? Some math isn't working out right. But that's how I started. So then as I grew, the challenge became, again, I'm entrepreneurial. There's things I see that I want to do differently. And I struggled with how to implement that in an organization that wasn't mine and wasn't open to alternative ways of doing things, which is fine. That's their choice. But I tried, and I got to a spot where I said, okay, well, if we can't make these changes, then I guess, I need to do my own. So March 1st of 2021, I left the agency I was at. I owned my book and took it with me and started on my own.
Of 2021.
I'm sorry, 2001.
Yes. Okay.
There you go.
Yeah. Which
a little bit longer than that.
So that's when you started Minnesota Insurance Group. Mm-hmm. Now, the previous agency, was that an independent agency?
Yeah.
It was. Yep. Okay. So, what gave you, the entrepreneurial piece of it, which makes sense, but what did that look like in terms of markets? Did you join a network, or did you get direct appointments?
I did both. So it was 2001, a little bit of a hard market at that time. And so I approached all of the carriers I had. And again, I didn't go into it saying I was going to go on my own.
Yeah.
I just wanted like a regular job. And I don't have that today. I'm working crazy hours. I'm here in a snowstorm.
Yeah.
I work, I don't have a cushy job. I have a job I love, but it's not what I went into it 25 years ago planning to. And so some of the markets I just approached and I pulled on my own. Those that I couldn't encouraged me that they wanted to continue, but I ended up connecting up with a aggregator at the time, and there was no penalty to leave. I think contracts are very different now today, but back then there was no penalty to leave. So I went in, I built up a book, and then financially and strategically, because processing was slow and hard, I decided to leave on my own, and I left there just a couple years later, and pulled those contracts that I couldn't get initially that wanted such high numbers. I was able to pull those off on my own. So
Yeah.
since then, I've had no other aggregator relationship, and I think they're great for people that want to start off. You kind of have to have a place to get your markets.
Yeah, and you are I definitely view you as a pioneer in many aspects. I mean, really, the blazes your own trail.
Yeah.
Well, I first thought that when we were chatting one time at a IAOA event, and you talked about playing hockey
Yep.
At a young age, which at that time there were there were not the hockey programs that there are now
There really was no
for
women's
girls.
hockey.
No,
No, I'm
no.
in my 50s, so there was no
So,
women's hockey
so
when I was in middle school and elementary.
and you
So,
played real hockey.
yep.
So that in itself is a pioneer. But then to start an insurance agency in your mid 20s,
Yeah, mid to late 20s.
I
So,
mean, to do that for anybody is, I mean, brilliant, right? But
or
yeah,
stupid.
so
I mean, I'll tell you, there was, Brad, I'm going to tell you, there was a lot of ignorance that went into it. I mean, if I would have known now, and then what I know now, I probably would have done some things differently. And it's possible that I might not have even done it. I'm super successful at it.
yeah,
I was ignorant in some of those challenges, which is great because I'll approach anything and overcome anything I can.
yeah, yeah, which speaks to your
Ignorance and stupidity are super great tools when you're an entrepreneur.
I might say driven
Yeah.
and determined and
My husband might have slightly different both of those, but yeah, same category.
maybe. Well, yeah, I can only imagine. We'll move on. So tell us about the makeup of your team now. What does that look like? How many staff do you have? You said you focus on commercial.
Yep. So as you know, I mean, I did acquire an agency in July of
Yeah.
2022. I've been working on an acquisition strategy for a couple years, really solidified that after completing the Goldman Sachs 10,000 small business program. Had a hard plan and knew what I needed to do. I did partner with Live Oak Bank. I might pay a quarter of a point or a half a point more or something. I'll tell you, hands down, the most efficient lending experience I've ever had. They're super knowledgeable in what we do. So I kind of got prepped for that. So I do have two locations, so Wayzata and Coon Rapids. So Wayzata is myself, and I have 5 office staff here with us. I have 2 dedicated Wayzata virtual employees who are out of the Philippines. And then at Coon Rapids, I acquired 6 employees there. I still have all 6 employees, and I brought on a dedicated virtual employee for them. So there's 7 total there, and 6, 7, 8 total here if you count the 3 virtual employees.
Okay. And so of the 8 at the Wayzata location, are those service roles? Are some of them sales? What's that look like?
Yeah. Oh, and I forgot to add, I do have 1 contracted agent. So Pat's been an agent with me about 21, 22 years. So she does her own service. She owns her own book. I think she's in her 70s. I mean, this is an industry you can work in for a very long time. Yeah. She loves what she does. So, so at this location, there's me. I'm kind of the jack of all trades. I do need to, part of this process now with the acquisition is I have to remove myself from some of the roles that I have played, some of which I don't like and I'm happy to give up, but some I have enjoyed, and it's hard for me to let some of that go. But I'm really the primary producer here. Okay. So I shake the hands, I kiss the babies, I woo them, I do all that kind of stuff. And then after that, somebody else needs to take it. So I can do the intakes, I can make the coverage recommendations, but quoting it, putting it together, all that stuff, all that endorsement stuff, I really don't do.
Yeah.
But I like that initial relationship building part. Yep. I have 1 outside salesperson. So we are kind of developing. We used to be a situation where somebody would kind of do everything. I'm trying to actually develop the Wayzata location to have a sales roles and service roles. My background's psych, and I do believe that people have a strength and they gravitate towards one or the other. You can do
Yes.
both, but I always say, if forced to decide, have to choose that game, you either have to service an account that came in at the same time as somebody wants a new quote. Which one do you find yourself doing more or first? And that's really probably where your primary role should be. And so I feel like when we have service people selling, their follow-up probably isn't as strong. They're not hunting the same way.
Sure.
Yeah. And so I really want to, my next step for Wayzata and for Coon Rapids is to kind of really delineate these teams and create strength in what they do well. And so that's a work in process. That's not going to happen overnight. But so really I have my first dive into that is one outside person. So they're a base plus commission, and they're out networking, events, relationships, building centers of influence, and their primary compensation is driven by commission based.
Yeah.
Then they won't service. All of that goes back to the agency for service. Everybody else is an account manager. And in that respect, it's from A to Z, every part of that client relationship that they're responsible for. And so I have one dedicated personal lines. Shirley's been around for as long as I have. And she's got some credentials in personal lines, risk management. She's awesome. And she loves what she does, and she's great. She's autonomous. She can handle what she wants to handle. And then I have commercial lines, and they do the same thing. So, certificates, changes, all that advice stuff and kind of that risk management or coverage stuff still comes back to me, but that's part of that development piece for me to be able to shift into somebody that can do what I do in that sales capacity. So for Wayzata, it's mostly account managers, and then one outside producer, one contracted agent, and then myself really filling that producer role.
Okay.
And so up at Rapids, it's all one office manager and then all account managers. So they're handling, there's no outside producer up at that location.
Okay. So let's get into that acquisition. So you had been looking to acquire for some time.
Yep.
How did this opportunity come about?
Well, my husband will tell you that I no longer have an opportunity to complain about anything he buys off of Facebook, because this was a very expensive acquisition from a Facebook posting. And I didn't actually see it. So I have to give credit to one of my Minnesota agents that I know really well, and one of my Georgia agents that I know really well, who both sent me a separate message and said, hey, there's a post on Facebook for an agency. I think this is you. I think you go check it out. Here's the link. Go find out. So I did. So I had other people kind of keeping their eye out for something that might sound like it fit, because I was open with everybody about what I'm trying to do. And I've been open about putting out offers and not getting selected, and not getting to the front table, or getting an offer, getting accepted into the top running, and then somebody else with cash equity ups their offer and then I bow out. I mean, I've lost 4 or 5 deals. Wow. And that sucks, but I've been open about it. So those that knew me, they're kind of cheering for you and going, oh, here's an opportunity. Maybe this one will work for you. So also
probably a good education though, going through that 4 times,
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you really do. I can't tell you, you have to be prepared, and you will be shocked at how much information and data you will need in order to do it. I'm happy to provide you, so your listeners, if the DNA forms that they ask you for, all the stuff that they want you to basically prepare, it takes time, and half of that battle is making sure your own operation is ready to plug into that, so that you have no questions about your equity and that you are bankable. You have to be bankable. Otherwise, you're not going to get a loan, to go make an acquisition, unless the seller's going to self-fund. So.
And I'm sorry, could you say the lender that you went through again?
Yeah, I used Live Oak Bank.
Live Oak. Okay.
Yep. And so we have an SBA loan. So the nice thing about that is not a lot down. So it allowed me some flexibility with, other funds to make some other changes in the organization and stuff. So we did do an SBA, but there's 1,000 other ways to cut it. So.
Did they perform evaluation of that agency?
Yes. So, and that's some of that paperwork that you have, they call it an agency DNA form. There's a debt schedule. You have to do projections. So I use an Excel sheet. And luckily I had learned how to do those projections through that 10,000 small business program. And they had one. So you have to do a projection and a 3 to 5 year budget for your existing agency. And then you have to do one for the acquired entity, because they have to make sure that, again, that there's funds available to cover the debt service.
So there's so many different aspects of an acquisition. There's the purchase. Okay, so let's stay on that for a second. So there was a valuation.
Yep.
Did the sellers, how far away were the sellers and you as the buyer from a purchase standpoint? Was it pretty close? How did the negotiation process go?
Yeah, it was pretty easy. I mean, they had a number in mind. I ran their numbers, again, using Excel formulas and stuff to pull out life and health stuff and things like that. And, their number wasn't too far off. The other value part of that was figuring out what those expenses were and what ongoing expenses I was going to have. Because once I pull out what's not going to continue, that's that whole EBITDA everybody talks about.
Yeah.
Once you pull out what's not going to continue, you can look at where that is. And if you're bringing in a role, so for example, let's say that they have an employee making 70,000. If that employee, I can do that with a VA making 24, then I can remove that difference.
Correct.
And I've got extra cash flow. I might be able to pay more for an agency if I know that I can cash flow. But if you don't have that skill set and you've got to hire another $70,000 person, you will have to take that into account in your offer. So we weren't that far apart.
Okay.
I really it came down to what were the real numbers. And at first, what the total agency value was inflated. So, there's rounded up numbers. And then, so once you start pulling statements and you're like, nope, I'm okay with the number we got to, and whatever percentage that was, let's just call it 2%. If the number was X and it was 2% of that, well, then once the number became Y, I stuck with, it's still only 2% of that. So we agreed on this. And just because you inflated your number doesn't mean that I'm going to now go up to a higher valuation point. I can serve this purpose. Now, they still could have if that's what you wanted to do, but I chose to stay within a realm of where we were. So it wasn't super hard to get there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So there's all that difficulty.
Yeah.
That's one piece. You're taking over an existing team of 6.
Mm-hmm.
What does that look like? What's your first introduction? You walk in and say, "Hi, I'm Dawn. I'm your new leader."
How your new leader? Yeah.
How did that go?
So every agency is going to do it differently, but it is not uncommon that doesn't happen until right at the end, because nobody wants to tell a team that there's an ownership change, because that's usually when people will leave, is they panic and they don't know what change is coming, and that's just natural tendency. So
fair, right? Yeah.
Literally a few days before the acquisition. So I did as much research as I could, Facebook, Google, try to get a handle on who I had up there. I asked reps who I had, tell me about the team, tell me what you know. And again, I guess I came in, I introduced myself, and I literally said, I understand that you guys are an incredible team of people. That's the rumor on the street. And my intention is to learn what I can from you, bring you value to improve your job satisfaction and the value that you feel you bring. I don't think there's anything broken. If there was something broken, I probably wouldn't be trying to purchase you. You got some great stuff, and I just want you to give me an opportunity, to work with me. And my intention is not to come in and implode your process. We will make some changes, but those will be, step by step. And so I was very transparent with them that I'm not coming in to just like throw the baby out with the bathwater and start over. That it was a profitable agency. Their top 2 carriers matched our top 2 high commission paying super regionals. So auto owners in West Bend, awesome ways to really significantly increase our position with both those carriers.
Yeah, right.
So I didn't want to break anything. So,
What did it look like from a standpoint of their process?
yep,
And was that something that was evaluated, during the, during your, courting
yep,
process?
yep,
Because that's so important, right?
yep,
I mean,
absolutely. So that was what was interesting is I'm a little more techie comfortable over here at the
mm,
Wayzata location. Where I saw my value was they still mailed out a bunch of stuff and they didn't have certain softwares and programs. And so I realized that some of my value and some of my increase in profitability was going to come from eliminating
yeah,
expenses that were unnecessary and stuff like that. So I have not come in and thrown a bunch of stuff out. I've been one at a time.
yeah,
I got everybody Adobe, the pro version of Adobe. We got rid of some kind of a sign thing they were using. I brought them a VA. They fought that a little bit at
yeah,
first, and now they can't live without her. So I brought in change, but I did it in a way that I communicated it was intended to make their jobs
yeah.
more like at the end of the day, did they enjoy what they did more than they did yesterday?
Yeah. Was that a challenge for you, seeing some of these operations and knowing that there was a better way, but having patience to say, I can't do everything at one time. They're going to revolt, and three of them are going to leave.
Yep. It's hard today. I mean, there's stuff I'm still trying to do today
Yeah.
that I wish I could just do. I think the one regret I have right now, and I shared that with them, is I didn't probably move quick enough to consolidate agency management systems. They were super afraid of that change. They had had their management system, which was Partner XE, for 7 years. They'd been on
Mm.
other ones in the past, but they've been there 7 years, and they were super afraid of a big, the first thing they asked me,
Yeah.
are you going to change AMSs? So I realized maybe that's the thing I need to like not do right away. In hindsight, I should have done it sooner. It took me 6 months to do it. We just did it at the end of January. My challenge was I wasn't able to be as strong of a resource for them because I didn't know their system and I wasn't going to
Yeah.
learn it. So my regret, and I told them, is I think I would have been a better resource and you would have felt more supported if we would have moved you, maybe not the first month, but sooner than 6 months. So
What AMS do you use?
we have Hawksoft.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
So, but the benefit of that is that yes, that is a terrifying thing, I think, for any
I know.
office,
Yep.
is changing any AMS. We 2
Yep.
years ago, we changed from AMS 360, the only one that my staff has ever known, to Hawksoft.
Mm-hmm.
And that was scary, but we were, all doing it together and just struggled through it, and then we're better because of it. This, I think, would be a better circumstance because your existing staff knows it. So
Yep.
at least, new office can lean on the old office to
Yep.
say, hey, where is this? How do we do this? Massive help, I would imagine. And then do you have somebody on your Wyzetta team that could act as kind of a trainer for that sort of?
Well, we could, except again from a capacity. I'm kind of a big fan of the EOS stuff, and I look at capacity. I have people, but we don't have this capacity in our day right
Mm,
now to allocate. So what I did do is I did actually pay Hawksoft. We are doing accounting training right now. I bought 7 or 8 hours with Debbie. I had, I don't know, 15 hours with Tiffany, and everybody logged on. We all did it together. Even this office, there's things we could learn. So they learned it new, we learned it
yeah,
together. So we all got a brand new ground up training opportunity. And it cost me some money, but it was probably better spent than me potentially replicating errors that we were doing or things that we hadn't done well and maybe hadn't updated in how Hawksoft does them or capabilities, stuff like that. So I did pay to have it done.
okay. Your existing staff, was there any that you're aware of, any apprehension on their end of things of this new
My
acquisition?
Wayzata location,
Yeah,
yeah, we had a pretty big staff turnover as a result of it.
really.
Yep. And I don't think it was the result of acquiring the location. It was a result of the changes I was making in advance before that. So I think I touched on earlier, my push is to segregate sales and service to some degree, that somebody's primary responsibility is sales and somebody's primary responsibility is service. And because we had been account managers here, that meant that when a piece of business came in, then whoever was talking to that person took it. That doesn't make you great at sales. It just means that you took that, and then the problem is you might build a great relationship and you talk to them and you get the info and you do quotes and you have a great solution. But if you email it to them once and never follow up, you're not going to close it. Whereas a salesperson, more of a hunter versus a farmer.
Correct.
So that was my challenge, was we were getting so much inbound business that it wasn't being handled right because it wasn't a salesperson handling it. So I was pushing to divide that, and we did a lot of that through EOS, and that created challenges and issues for my existing staff who did not want to make that change. So that I started to hire outside producers in January of 2022, February and March. So we did that. The acquisition was coming. And so that actually created a rift for some existing employees that didn't want that change. So that change was probably coming anyways. It wasn't a result of the acquisition up there. It was a result of changes I made beforehand. So
did they feel that, oh, we're being asked to do this, I don't want to do this, that's not what I was hired for, so I'm out of here?
Not so much that. It was just I was forcing a distinction between sales and service.
Yeah.
And, people you've been here for a long time, several years, you get into a state of mind and you get really rigid. Some people are super rigid. I'm just not a rigid thinker. And so I don't always work well with super rigid thinking people because they can't see the other side or they can't see the big picture. And so, I give a long runway for getting there. Sometimes it's too long, but at the end of the runway, we're taking off, whether you're on the plane or not.
So right. Yeah. Well said. So I went a very similar route beginning of last year, transitioning from just a service staff into let's focus on some sales.
Yep.
And, with the intention of, hey, we need to increase our policies per household. We need, all that sort of thing. So, and I tried to I stole some from Billy Wagner, who's a pretty smart guy.
Awesome guy.
And I tried to gamify it and I started keeping score. And because although I've been asking, this team for 7+ years, hey, we should be cross-selling when you don't see that. Just asking doesn't get it done. So we're going to start keeping score and try to offer some incentive, which again, this was part of one of Billy Wagner's ideas, was that I set out a certain amount of metrics for each one on my staff. And I offered incentives, and the biggest one was a rotating half day off on Friday. My team loves time off. I'm sure that everybody does, and they love that. So, but it started creating a habit.
Okay.
When I see this, I need to ask, and I tied in reviews, which I never really had my service team involved in asking for reviews, really passively.
Yep.
But so I got them involved in that. And that was just a matter of asking, not how many did you get? I need you to ask 15 times this quarter. And I keep track of cross-sell. I don't keep track of cross-sell attempts. That became too much, but how many you could cross-sell doing reviews and all this sort of thing. It's the best thing I ever did. But to exact your point, you're 100% correct in that you have a new lead that comes in. And if Sally grabs that, she's going to quote it once and then not follow up. It's just not. It's not how they're wired. That's not how they've been wired for 20 years.
Yep, correct. She can quote the heck out of that thing.
Yeah,
she's just not going to hunt it the way a salesperson does for that organic sales.
And it's not their fault. I mean, you can't. That's what separates salespeople from service people. A lot of times, the salespeople, they're driven. They're just that's driven. I mean, that's how they're paid.
It's no different. I am not good at checking the boxes, getting the apps, making sure everything's. So my side of that, I know that's not a bad thing. It just means I just need to gravitate towards where my strengths are. And my strengths are shaking hands and kissing babies.
so we evolved into, hey, this is fine. You can take it, quote it, present it, and then through our CRM, we just need to notify me so I can assign it to somebody that's going to follow up on it. Because otherwise, it's going to sit there dead, and
Yeah,
it's got to be sold. So,
yeah,
yeah.
yeah. I do. I don't know that I really understood that, a long time back, but in the last 5 years, it's really come to light that you can have, there's really two sides of our industry, and there is a sales side and there is a service side.
Yeah.
And, convenience and cost drive us to lump them together into an account manager. But if you really want an excellent retention team, somebody that cares most about every time that client calls, what their experience is, that person is not the same that's going to leave that behind. If you have to choose talking to the client that's been a client of yours for 20 years versus the new shiny thing, if you're going to do it, you're giving the best experience to both if you divide those up to where somebody's strengths are. That's my opinion.
Agreed.
So.
Agreed. Going forward with your acquisition, what does that look like? It seems now, from what I can tell, they're still basically two separate offices.
Yep.
Do you intend on bringing these together, or leaving them separate? Or
I probably will leave them separate, but I will start to create some parallels. So I'm in the process right now. I actually may be signing a purchase agreement today on a building. So I will be looking at moving the location. I mapped out where every of the employees currently lives. I found out where would be the least disruptive, and I focused my leasing and purchasing sites in that circle. And I think I have something that will work, but I didn't want to disrupt again where people were coming from. That'll give me an opportunity to take. So you asked me about branding, and I haven't touched anything over there.
yeah.
But my intention is to. So we are going to look at a logo rebrand. I will. Their legal name is Aspen Insurance Group. I have the DBA of Aspen Agency because that's what's been around a long time. So I don't want to remove that. There's value to that. Why would I throw that away? But I want to tie it in with a larger brand cohesiveness. So I will end up hiring somebody to help us with that. I will not try to do that myself because that's not my skill set. But I will try to find a way to keep their identity and that history, yet bring a match in and take that opportunity to rebrand us a little bit too, because I haven't done that in 17, 18 years.
Yeah.
So there will be some similarity, just is coming. Probably like, I would say July or August, with coordinating with the move is the intention.
Let me ask you this: with the takeover of the new agency, how did you handle that from a customer standpoint? Did you notify customers?
Nope.
Or I think that's the route to go.
I did not. I chose not to.
Well, the staff is the same.
Yeah,
who they've been dealing with is
I guess
the same.
that's the big thing is I didn't even make a big announcement. I mean, you'll find that I didn't go out and go, woo, woo, woo. Secretly at home, I'm A, tired, and B, woo, woo, woo. But at the end of the day, it wasn't about me. It wasn't about my ego. It wasn't about anything else. It was really about increasing my footprint with certain carriers, crossing contingency thresholds, solidifying relationships, and creating an opportunity for more growth in the ways that I want to mentor. It was a perfect match for us. So, I guess I just didn't make a big announcement, and I didn't make it about me.
Yeah. So. My opinion, and I've been talking to some others about this exact same thing. My opinion is that you send something like that out to the customer base, and 50% of them say, it's time for me to shop.
Yep.
So.
Yeah, I looked at it as they've been talking to these same 6 people for however long. I'm always a behind the scenes person. So whatever they're going to do, and they're going to do it better, maybe will come from some of the tools and resources and education and mentorship I can provide, but they're the boots on the ground, and that wasn't changing. So.
I'm sorry. When did you close on this acquisition?
July 15th.
July
I
15th.
still think it was effective like July 1st, but it was
Okay.
right. Yeah.
Sure.
And because things go slow. So your closing date doesn't always work out to be
No.
the date that you actually close.
Now that you own essentially two agencies, how does this change how you spend your time?
My God.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm not sleeping a whole lot. So um, there's times that, I mean, I'm really doing several jobs, and part of it's because I'm not trying to come in and do a bunch of sweeping changes. But I have my full-time job that I was still pretty ingrained in the day to
Yeah.
day. I was quoting a restaurant yesterday, so I was helping quote. I'm doing some training in accounting Hawksoft today. I still am very deep in the day to day stuff here at the local. I was at a location, so I do have to remove myself, which means I have
Yeah.
to reassign those tasks. But today I have those tasks. I also have the full-time tasks of everything that was agency ownership and sales production up there. So that's two full-time jobs. And I'm trying to add staff to allow me to step out. So I'm training. So all of those things, it's a massive amount of time, and I underestimated. I'm really grateful for my husband, my kids that have been super tolerant. It's just, if you're going to do it right, it takes time and investment, and you only have so many hours, and that's where it comes from.
Yeah.
So,
Last question on the acquisition.
yeah,
I've went a few more than I intended to
yeah,
even,
you're
but
fine.
there's just so many areas.
It was the best learning experience I've ever
Yeah.
had, and I hope to do it again soon. But
Yeah, that was going to be one of my questions too. Hindsight, of course, we always know more hindsight. Anything you could have improved on your end with this transaction?
yep, I will tell you that I probably relied too much on Live Oak. Not that it was their fault, but I had to get all of the statements, accounting statements, and production statements, and I relied on them to kind of validate some of those numbers. And in hindsight, I should have had my own validation system to make sure that that what we were thinking was coming through was the right numbers. Because some stuff got missed, and they just got missed because it wasn't really their job; it was my job, and I kind of rubber stamped what came through. Really, really, really reviewing past non-piracies, non-competes. That has to be solidly buttoned up. We did a lot of that. I made sure I had new ones out in place. But that's really important to make sure you've got that. Looking at how you allocate pre and post close, like changes or cancels. If you have a big audit and somebody owes back $80,000 on a work comp, and you're about to get a $8,000 debit on day 2 of ownership, is your purchase agreement outlining that occurred pre?
Yeah.
And so that really becomes the seller's financial responsibility.
Yeah.
I will tell you that one of the best things I think we did, well, I have one regret too, and you and I chatted about it, but we created an incentive to keep the employees around. So again, remember, there is a whole set of panic that goes into this acquisition, and people will just start to try to figure some stuff out. So we had a bonus payment set up at the end of 90 days. So everybody got just a check at the end of 90 days if they were still with us, for sticking around through the hard stuff. It gave me an opportunity to sell them on me as an owner.
Yeah.
I needed them to get to know me, and that I was their biggest cheerleader. And once I could sell them in that 90 days, that's what your non-piracy is on your producers and your account managers, is you just got to sell your next account manager to the client that they're as good as the last one or better. I just needed to sell them on the fact that I'm all in for them. I want them to be successful. So I needed that 90 days. And then I tied in a few other future bonuses, because I do feel like once we got into rhythm, we were going to be good, but I had to get through that initial fear stage. So that's something I think that was really successful for us. My big regret, and I shared it with you, is in that fear of too much change at one time, I didn't move our agency management system until January, so 6 months after, and it really stunted my ability to support them. Once we got through that first 90 days and we were all like, I like you, you like me, we're going to make this work.
Yeah.
Then I wish I would have been ready to go then, because I had the love,
Yeah.
But I couldn't support them, and it took 90 more days to launch.
Yeah.
And then by then there was frustration with, you don't know my system. And I'm like, no, I don't. And I'm not going to learn it tomorrow because,
Yeah.
you know,
That's a tough
so
one.
so I really, if I do it again, I would wait that 90 days, but I would start doing it then. So I'm launching at that 90 to 120. So.
Are you actively looking now are you ready? I mean, you probably need to settle on this one, but
Yeah, I probably need to let the dust settle. I mean,
yeah.
I'm always looking.
Yeah.
So, because I think an acquisition that's perfectly right is exactly what you should always be looking for. I mean, I now have a debt schedule that I keep up to date. So I'm putting an offer out on a building. All of the stuff that I have to do to get a loan to buy a building is all the same stuff I had to
Yeah.
do. I have to have all that stuff anyway. So I'm just keeping it up to date.
Yeah.
The sooner you get that together, the faster you can move and the more nimble you are in that negotiation phase, because you're competing against potentially somebody else who isn't organized and doesn't have that process.
Mhm.
And either they aren't going to be able to get to the table or they're going to throw dumb money at something, and you can't compete with dumb anyways.
No.
So, yeah.
No.
So
How are you utilizing VAs in your Wayzata office?
Yep.
And then you said there was some reluctance in the new office.
Yep.
So how did you start and gain that team's trust to say, hey, this person's here to help you. Here's the way that they can help to get this off your plate.
Yep. So we've used VAs coming up on about 4 years. I was so scared to start and try because I didn't know how to train and onboard. And I didn't really know exactly how I was going to use them.
Yeah.
I ended up just kind of picturing, I have 4 kids right now. They're 7, 15, 14, 15, and 18. And I said, if I brought my 18-year-old in and said, you're going to work here for a week, which is what I tried to do last summer when he wasn't going to get a job. And I told him if he doesn't have a job, he's coming in to help me. And I realized that I had to really break things down.
Yeah.
And so by doing that with a virtual employee, a virtual assistant, VA, whatever you're going to use for phraseology, really they are just a team member. They're just not sitting next to you.
Yes.
And you figure out which tasks you want them to do. So how I approached it so here we have 2 and they're all commercial dedicated. I don't really have a personal lines VA right now. Probably could use one, not totally on my first line agenda. But we have 2 dedicated commercial lines VAs, and they do stuff that we like. They'll prepare certificates. They follow up on stuff that we have. They create Accord apps. So we had a nonprofit that we took over on a BOR yesterday. So that was actually out of the Aspen office, and they had an opportunity. They wanted to requote. And I said, well, I'll help you requote, but we're going to get a BOR on this first, so that if the ultimate answer is this is our best option, we did all this work, but now we're going to take it on the BOR. And I helped them with that step. They did it. They got the BORs. Then you have to create the Accord. So from the information we had, our VAs went in and created all the Accord apps with everything that they had. Then it goes back to the account manager to finish. So creating Accord apps, ordering certificates, processing all the mail, cancels and reinstates and billing invoices, and whatever your process is, a lot of that can be done by a virtual employee who's not licensed, and it only needs to escalate when it does. For example, I sat down with the Aspen team up there and I said, how many of you really, really, really want to touch every cancel notice or download that comes in that was followed by a reinstatement 10 days later? How many of you feel like you need to actually know those things? Not one of them. How many of you enjoy touching those things? Not one.
Yeah.
If I could give you one person to do that for you, and the only time you see it is if the day before it cancels, you have a suspense in your system to check it, and it says this is still unpaid. Would that be an asset to you? Absolutely. Now we are going to train our virtual employee to handle all of those items that come in on download or by mail. And the only time you're going to see it is when it isn't paid, whatever your time frame is, 3 days before, 1 day before, whatever you want. And I sat with each of them. So how did I transition them? I sat down with each privately and I said, I want you, and I gave them a list of stuff before our meeting. We sat for an hour And I said, I want you to tell me the top 3 things that you don't like to do every day. And it was, well, this. And so I made a list. And I said, if I can remove these 3 things, or maybe it was 2 or whatever, if I can remove these 3 things, would this make your job more enjoyable? And then I said, as your owner now, my goal is to solve these 3 first problems for you. I'm here to solve these problems for you. So I had 6 people. I had 18 problems to solve. And I went about it as quickly as I could and allocated as much time to training and creating a process for Rochelle to do those things for them. There was reluctance at first. I think some of it's the concept of a non-licensed person and getting over that. The other, I think, is also just fear of job security. Like, this is what I do. So what do I do if I don't do this? And so you just have to get over it, and you just have to kind of push through it. And it really does kind of take just opportunity. So once they had it and we were working through it, then it was, oh, I really like this. And oh my gosh, she's great. Or, I saw exchanges on Slack of, oh my, you already done? Thank you, and they're surprised that they can do it. And they're not perfect. I think that's when people ask about VAs. I'm like, they're just people. Yeah. Did you make a mistake yesterday? Because if you made a mistake yesterday, they're going to make one. So just use it as a training opportunity, but you can't expect them to not make mistakes. You just have to give them use it as a training opportunity.
Yeah. So. Well, I can't think of a better way to approach that, especially when there's some reluctance to go after their pain point. Do you want to do 3 less mortgage verifications in a given day? Do you want to not have to do the data entry to requote that account? Whatever it is, their pain points, and you could take some of those away. Well, that's meaningful.
Absolutely. That's how I did it. Was what is it? Your top 3 things you don't want to do, and I will figure out how we're either going to automate them, eliminate them, or have the VA do it. So they said, we still take cash here, and I went. I was like, okay, so effective at whatever date, I'm like, and they're like, oh, some of our clients, the older ones, they come in, this is what they do every second Tuesday. Like, well, give them some time. I'm not going to tell you that you got to kick them out, but give them the warning a couple times that, by the time we move next summer, we won't be doing cash anymore. Hey, can you find a way to bring it in a cashier's check? And eventually they all will shift. Yeah. But, that was their pain point. Or mortgage changes, as you know, from personal lines, you get the phone call. Can you verify this information over the phone? And then you get done with that. And then they're like, can you send it as a document anyways? So we made a rule here that we do zero phone verifications. I take 0 requests at this office.
Waste of time.
Yep. So I say, as soon as they come in, everybody's instructions, including the VA, says you can either email that or fax that. And then what's great is then the VA can be assigned to that inbox. And they can, any mortgage changes that they can just do, they can do. And then if it's different, if it's a certificate request with weird language, then it can get set up and then suspended to, the account manager or whatever. But they don't have to take those phone calls. They had authority to not take those phone calls anymore.
Yeah. So. We did that. We did that as well. I mean, it's incredible. And even the cash. And so you've probably not accepted cash in your office for
10 years, 12 years. Long time.
I didn't go that far back, but when that was one thing I capitalized on COVID, once that I said, oh, we're not going back. This is my out. Should have done it before. And that even included payments in the office. We won't, even if someone calls in, you can handle that. I mean, people have to learn to adapt. And for the 5 people that still want to call our office on a monthly basis, they can adapt or, so I wonder how that's perceived by that office, who that's part of their culture, right? And that's how they operate.
Yep. And that's why I didn't just say like effective on Monday, we're not taking cash. I understood there's a relationship there. Yeah. And so I set expectations and I set a future date and I gave them time, and I said, you can always say it's my new owner. I mean, I don't care what you say, blame it on me. Blame it on the fact that we're using a community bank and there's not a local branch for you to swing by. Tell them, whatever you need to tell them, but tell them it's like this, it's not you, it's me. Like, I tell my kids that are of dating age, if you're going to break up with somebody, just it's me. Just that's what it is. Walk away. It's not you, it's me. I mean, it's your cash is great. We just, we have a rule and our carrier and our E&O and I don't know, fire department or whatever.
Last question.
Yep.
What would you like to improve on for the Minnesota Insurance Group in 2023?
In all honesty, I would like to improve on reducing my role. So I am your stereotypical over-involved agent, owner. And part of it is I do love what I do. And so I'm trying to work on replacing the advice that I enjoy giving clients. I love it when a client comes and wants that advice piece. I've switched that to, I'm going to use that same strength and skill set for my team members, and I'm going to educate and elevate them to become the same risk manager person that I am, so that my impact isn't 1, my impact is 12 or whatever that number is. So really that's actually my biggest goal for 2023 is to reduce and alter my responsibilities here so that I'm throwing a wider net of who's winning from that knowledge, because I can only tell the same story once every time. But if I can teach my team to tell the story, then we can reach a wider audience.
That's a really good one. And that's one that is going to take time.
Yep.
Your team can probably handle, 90% of the questions that come in anyway.
Yep.
And then everything's could be a training tool after that. I think that's an excellent one. And it's a must for you, right? With this expanded, 2 agencies, that you're now in charge of. You have to. It's tough. It's tough to replace your knowledge and your passion, for giving in that way, but it can be done.
Well, I think, I shared with you that the agency I acquired was about twice my current size. If I had acquired something smaller than me, I might have felt more of that, just roll everything in. And I don't know if I would have felt the same pressure to change. I have no choice. I cannot run the size of the organization we are today by still being a producer and an agent in my office. I completely eliminated that possibility by the acquisition that I made without, again, ignorance. There was some ignorance and I can do this. And really the answer is no, I actually can't. I can actually do this. So now how do I do it?
I lied. Last question, which I think it's becoming kind of a hot topic in our industry now, is to create an intranet.
Yes.
And which I thought of while you were talking and makes kind of perfect sense for, I don't have one. That's on my list for second quarter of this year to really, really get into. For you, I think it makes perfect sense with the 2 offices because you have to have some cohesiveness. You have to have one communication and message. And that's a simple way, would be a great way for you to do
Absolutely.
it. Here's our processes. Here's some of our workflows. Here's, who our contacts, whatever it is.
Yep. It's something I actually also looked at, Brad, last year. We're on a server that's local, hosted here in my office. So we do have a network system. So everything is kind of like that. It's just not, there's way better ways to do it today than I'm doing it. So one of my goals would be to start working on that. But again, I have to extract myself from the sales part in order to do more of the, how are we doing this better and differently, to make those improvements. But I'm all on board. I think that's absolutely the best way to go about it.
It sounds like an outsourced project for
If,
Dawn.
if anyone listening, has a consultant that will build that, I'm all ears.
There are, there are.
So,
Well, I want to thank you so much for your
yeah,
time. I kept you a little over today, but you gave so much good information from your acquisition and your experience. So thank you so much for
well,
sharing.
I'll share some of those folders and files
Yeah,
that
do
I
that.
got.
That'd be great.
I'll give you the templates, and if you want to use them, post them,
Okay,
share
I
them.
will.
Knowledge is power, and if you are
Yeah,
thinking about acquiring, the more prep work you can do in advance, it will absolutely pay off tenfold in your entire process as you go
yeah,
forward. So,
agreed. And as we discussed, a lot of times, unless you're exposed to it, you don't know everything to prep for or to
yeah.
plan for, to look for. So that's huge. So thank you for so much for sharing. Again, thanks for being here. I know your busy schedule.
Oh,
Everybody else, thanks for listening to another episode of the Agents to Owners podcast. And we'll see you next week.
all right. Thanks, Brad.
Bye, Don.
Bye bye.